Our friend Pete Yanity from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Pete, we were just talking in the break about South Carolina's big game, and those have to be probably more heartbreaking than blowout losses in the main sense that you have a top five team on the ropes and a chance to win at home. The student section basically had already come down to celebrate a big win there. Now, as you have a few days to digest what happened there in Columbia, what were your overall thoughts of Shane Beamer's team, the effort that they pulled out, and that very, very narrow win? Close win.
Being brutally frank, as they were leading with the 22-14 lead there in the fourth quarter, I was thinking to myself, is it going to be worth it, the fine they have to pay the SEC for the student storming the field, or is it better to save that money and put it toward rev share and however it works, NIL and, that kind of thing or something? But you talk about a reversal of emotions, but it's just so typical of what this team has gone through this year, because Sellers gets hurt in the second quarter against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is one heck of a football team. Right. That's a great team. They probably would have still won that game, but you just have to wonder in the back of your mind, how different might that game have been if Lenora Sellers was available and healthy and doing his thing? Could they have maybe pulled out a 24-20 home win? Okay, so then you look at the Missouri game, in which they led in the fourth quarter on the road in Columbia, did not particularly play well, but a stop here, a stop there by their defense, more than just whatever they had. I think were they negative rushing yards in that game? That was the game they were terrible off on the running game. A 300-yard passing game out of Sellers in that game. But so you're on the road, maybe you steal a win there. And then you go to LSU, you're right in that game. First snap of the game, you're under center and you fumble it and you basically hand LSU a touchdown. But as the game went on, South Carolina was pretty even with LSU, loses a tight one there. Did not play well against Oklahoma, but last year, the team they play this week, Ole Miss, came into Columbia and won almost the exact same kind of game that Oklahoma did. South Carolina looked flat, they looked lost. They eventually got it together, put the 6-game winning streak together. And so then last week, you bounced back from the Oklahoma game. Sellers is going to be decent. Nick Harbor, the constant mantra we've heard around here is get him the ball more. And frankly, if I've got a guy with that kind of speed, I would try everything under the sun, not just the vertical passing game. I'd be doing all kinds of stuff with him. And I even line him up in the backfield at times. And not that, these guys have forgotten more than I'll ever know. And Mike Shula, for all the criticism he gets, he's been an offensive coordinator with some great success. So I think he'll be fine as time goes on. But I just think that last week was one of those, again, stories that will just sum up this season for the South Carolina team. And you could argue the two most difficult games now are the two that they face in these next two games with a bye week in between, at Ole Miss and at Texas A&M. If you'd said, well, during that stretch, you might go 2-3, but at least you'll either take care of business at LSU because things are starting to shake there, and you'll beat either Alabama or Oklahoma at home, or maybe you get lucky, you win 3 out of 5. But that's the troubling thing, is that, by mid-November, this team could be sitting on 7 losses and need a waiver if they can, beat Coastal Carolina and then Clemson at 5-7 just to get to a bowl game.
Pete, I thought that the South Carolina defense came out and they played really well against Alabama. Now, some people could say Alabama was reeling from playing 4 straight AP-ranked opponents and they were just limping to the bye week. But what did you make of the Gamecocks' performance on defense?
Well, the fact that Ty Simpson was good but not great, to me, that's where it begins. I mean, it's not like to South Carolina what he's done to some other programs. And the fact that, again, that's a really good offense. And you look at some of the aspects of that game, and a South Carolina team that actually outgained Alabama in that ball game and limited the Alabama running game. And that tells you that they, forced them to try to put the ball in the air. Simpson was still really good, and, they still threw for 250 yards. You take that any day, but they were limited to what a paltry, number of yards, 72 yards run game. And that's not the balance that obviously DeBoer and crew would want. But I was impressed with the South Carolina defense. It's ever improving. They've got, Dylan Stewart has been good this year, not great. That could be because last year he benefited from having Kyle Kennard on the other side, who had to get a lot of attention. They've not necessarily had a defensive player who's wowed you. Kilgore and Smith in the secondary have had their moments. but there's not necessarily that one player on the D like they've had in recent years where it's like, wow, you know, Kyle Kennard last year, and you could almost say Stewart, but Kyle Kennard last year, it's like, boy, that's the best defensive end in college football.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Demetrius Knight come in, made a huge play to seal the rivalry game against Clemson, but he was a very productive player. They've gotten productivity on all three levels, but just no star power. But this was a very good collective effort, I thought, by the defense against a really good offensive team.
Absolutely. Every coach has to make some mid-season adjustments, and it looks like Shane Beamer and company will be doing so as well with their playbook. We'll get his thoughts first, and then we'll check back in with Pete.
For one, it's the volume that you take into a game plan with. So let's say that, you know, I don't know what NFL teams have. I think most NFL teams on their call sheet probably have 100+ plays available to call on a game. I'd say most colleges, when I was at, you know, Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, we usually, that little, you know, sheet of paper that you see him on the sidelines with, that thing usually has about 65 or 70 plays. And I'd say that's what most colleges are from a play call standpoint. We're no different. We did last week we talked about just, you know, shrinking that number a little bit. It wasn't drastic. It wasn't like we went from 90 plays to all of a sudden you got 40 to choose from. I mean, I think it was maybe 10 less than what we had, 15 less than what we had against Oklahoma. When you do that, you're able to, you know, practice more looks in practice and things like that. Defenses, I mean, the schemes you may get. It's certainly Lenoris every week, not just last week, Jack, but every week Lenoris has great ideas. Luke has great ideas. I mean, those guys are up here all the time watching tape at night on their own and coming up with ideas that they bring to Shula or they talk to me about. And so that's always part of the process. So it's simplifying the number a little bit. It's getting input from players like we always do.
So Coach did a good job of explaining how they're shrinking it, because if you hear just shrinking the playbook, I mean, you think, well, you're cutting that thing in half, and next thing you know, you're not going to, you know, run any of the same plays that you ran towards the beginning of the season. But he did qualify it and say, you know, it's probably 10 plays, 15 plays here and there. What's your sense of the way he'll manage both Lenore Sellers, the way the offense runs, and everything else as they move forward through the season, and like you said, try to get themselves into a bowl game?
A few thoughts on that, having heard Shane make that comment at his news conference this week, part of which we just played. And, yeah, again, he doesn't want it to be like, oh, this is a big story. They've made it simple suddenly. I think to the point of pulling some of the plays and maybe simplifying it for the week, Lenore Sellers, one of his hidden talents is what he's able to do when a play breaks down. I mean,
right.
It would be interesting to know if the Baltimore Ravens have the same example. I'm not trying to compare Lenore Sellers to Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson's a great improviser,
Absolutely.
right? Many times, you know, they've always had a home run hitter at running back. They got one of the best you could ever ask for right now. And they usually have a decent group of guys in the passing game, but more times than not, the Ravens will turn a game or turn momentum because Jackson decides to get out of the pocket and go make something happen. And I think the less structure around Lenore Sellers works well for him.
Right.
The guy they'll see this week, Trinity Chambliss, I think he's one of those guys that you would put in that same category. Jackson Dart a year ago for Ole Miss maybe was one that multiple playbook, lots of checks, lots of options that way. So I think it speaks to the fact that I'm sure the conversation they had among themselves was, let's go with the plays that have worked. Let's also give Lenoris the opportunity to create some things. And at times he did, and he was going against what is a really good Alabama defense. Anxious to see if Ole Miss is able to contain him and maybe not let him get the big play, but they took advantage after the late fumble on the punt. They certainly took advantage, and that looked like a design play for Sellers in the game last week against Alabama. But when you face other teams, maybe it's best to let Sellers, yes, have a playbook, have structure, have opportunities for Harbor to get his hands on the ball, but also make it so that you make that defense uncomfortable. And are they really running this, or is Sellers about to take off out of the pocket after, we brought a guy from the weak side trying to blitz? Something else you got to keep in mind, and this speaks a lot to Alabama's defense, give them credit. Their top two running backs, Rasul Faison and Oscar Attaway, combined for 25 yards rushing last week. So for all of the things they did offensively in outgaining the Tide and leading them into the fourth quarter, there is still not the kind of productivity they're getting out of the backfield like they got out of Rocket Sanders in years past and some others. They just don't have that running back who's established himself as a counterbalance. And Rocket Sanders last year, that was a really big part of the story because they developed a home run hitter that really complemented Sellers out of the backfield as well.
Absolutely. Just by the nature of the schedule, South Carolina does not have a lot of road games this year. They have obviously had that neutral site game to begin the season, a lot of home games, but now going on the road for the third time. The road has not been unkind to this team. You mentioned that LSU game. It was a close ball game. Also, the Missouri game was a close ball game as well. How do you think they'll handle the stakes now, once again, going on the road against a top 10 opponent?
Yeah, it's tough. And, you know, in Oxford, they've got to be kicking themselves. They had that game won between the hedges, and they'd be, you know, a top 3 or 4 team right now, probably, depending on what else happened. And then you got an open date. Then you got to go to Texas A&M. I still think Texas A&M is an excellent team, but I'm anxious to see how it plays out for them over the next few weeks. So you don't know where they'll be because it's a few weeks down the road, but those are 2 brutal road games. That guy right there has talked over and over again. This is what we're about. Best league in the country. You sign up to come play in these massive stadiums against the best teams in the world on the college level and get you ready for the NFL and to get you high exposure. You got to go against coaches like that from an offensive mind, Kiffin, and coaches like that from a defensive mind, Venables. They're seeing those 2 head coaches during this stretch. It's really tough right now. You look back, and again, the Vanderbilt game at home, the Missouri game on the road, put those in the win column, and then figure out a way to close the deal against Alabama, and you've got a whole different vibe, and you're thinking about 8 or 9 wins potentially, which against the schedule they had this year would be really good. They've got Coastal Carolina, which is, not been great this year, and I'm not so sure they've got a run to the Sun Belt title in them. They did get a big win against App State, and they are playing Thursday of this week. And you got the arch rival coming to your place, and by then, you know, Clemson's got enough talent; they can win anywhere, and they may have figured out whatever bumps in the road they've had offensively, and get a little bit more productivity out of places on defense that they're hoping to get. But, you know, that could be a game when you look at Clemson's schedule ahead and when you look at South Carolina and how the seasons are going, it really could be for a bowl bid on the line, which we have not seen for both teams in that game for years and years.
Absolutely. One quick yay, nay, or TBD on coaches before we go to Clemson really quickly. Shane Beamer and Mike Shula, will they be on campus next season? Yay, nay, or to be determined?
Shane Beamer says his dream job is the one he's in at South Carolina.
Yeah.
Shane Beamer is also the son of the legendary Virginia Tech head coach and the athletic director who's come in and gotten some positive things going and has supported the head coach that he inherited. But that's not the athletic director that hired Shane Beamer, and that's the reality of the world. But things appear to be going fine in that relationship, regardless of how this season has been going. However, there's a term that coaches often use, restarting your clock, and it may just be a reality, particularly if the sense is that Lenora Sellers decides to try to make the jump. They've got a pretty good guy in Cutter Woods waiting in the wings, but it may be a situation where Shane Beamer would love to continue on at South Carolina, but just may find the realities of a potential, and I have no idea if Virginia Tech is even on, if they have him on the radar. It makes sense, but it's an obvious conclusion. But Shane Beamer says he is in his dream job, so you would suppose if the opportunity is to continue in that and he feels confident, then he can get back to the kind of winning he's done. He's done a very good job at South Carolina. But that's a really tough one. I hate to be milquetoast on you.
No, I get it.
But I just know that the realities are, yes, maybe Virginia Tech is the proper landing spot at this time. But at the same time, I think he wants to be successful at a place where, you know, one of the great home atmospheres in the country. And you can win there. Steve Spurrier showed it with an assistant named Shane Beamer. And Beamer's had some good seasons. Mike Shula, great question from South Carolina's standpoint. Shane determined that, you know, maybe he needs to bring in yet another offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, Dow Loggins, Mike Shula. Is it time for a change there? I think Shula, conversely, it's probably 50-50 because there will probably be some NFL opportunities, and he may look at it as the way things are in college. One thing to go get an NFL free agent to fill a hole because you've got your quarterback under contract because he's your franchise guy or under contract, and you've got wide receivers you've just signed or whatever, you know, stability, as opposed to I've got to come up with a playbook next year and, this kid may have gotten a better NIL offer I was
Right.
counting on, and this running back, that guy. And interestingly enough, you may look at the pros as having a more stable roster management situation than you do the college ranks.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be really interesting to see how it all shakes out here in the offseason. Pete, thank you so much for your time today here on Southeast Sports Plus.
My pleasure, guys.